Good morning. I'm Dan Cook with BoneZone, and welcome to our webinar, The Orthopedic Additive Manufacturing Evolution You've Been Waiting For, presented by Orchid Orthopedic Solutions. Orchid is a global contract manufacturer and orthopedic technology developer. 2 years ago, Orchid set out to redefine what additive manufacturing could deliver to OEMs. The company focuses its investment on titanium large joint implants, building an EBM platform that could overcome cost and stability limitations that are common across the market. Joining me this morning to discuss that journey are Melissa Fowler, Director of Additive Manufacturing at Orchid, Scott Reese, Vice President of Business Development at Orchid, and Dave Schroeder, President of DW Schroeder Consulting, LLC. With that, I'll throw it over to Dave.
Thanks, Dan, and thanks to BoneZone for hosting this webinar. Special thanks to Scott and Melissa also from Orchid for inviting me to be part of this webinar, where we get to talk about Orchid's new 3D additive technology, which, looking back over the course of my career, is something I think will add new features for orthopedic devices moving forward. So by way of background, I've been in orthopedics since around 1990, starting at Biomet, which later became Zimmer Biomet. Over the years, I've had the opportunity to work across a wide range of technology platforms. My last 4 years at Zimmer Biomet were spent in Switzerland, where I led the platform technology development. During my career, I've worked on projects which have ranged from vitamin E cross-linked polyethylene to coatings for wear and infection resistance, doing biological safety assessments, and I've even managed teams looking at augmented reality and population simulation technologies. So after leaving the large OEM world last year, one of the things I wanted to focus on was consulting in the field of materials development for orthopedic devices. I've had a long history of working with Orchid, and over the past decade, have spent quite a bit of time working with them on their thick ceramic coating technology, which is trademark Altitude, which may be a topic for a future webinar, and we might even touch on it a little bit here today. Recently, or shortly after starting up my consulting business, I reconnected with Scott to talk about it, and he asked if I'd be willing to collaborate with them on some of their initiatives, including the one that we're talking about here today, which is their 3D additive technology. If we take a step back and look at additive manufacturing orthopedics more broadly, we can see an interesting pattern. It really goes back probably about 2 decades, and it was originally promised to basically replace almost all traditional based manufacturing techniques. The field for additive technology in orthopedics has largely been dominated by laser-based powder bed fusion systems, while electron beam system, which may have even predated the laser-based systems, are a little bit less common. Adoption of additive technologies for orthopedic devices have mainly focused on non-fatigue sensitive devices, primarily parts where a porous surface for bone ingrowth is key rather than high load-bearing performance. So there's some good reasons for why this has occurred. The first one, cost. Both equipment and per piece prices has been a limiting factor to adopting it into additional devices. A big one is mechanical properties, particularly fatigue, have constrained the use of additive in some of these components. And another big one is that in most of the current systems, whether they're laser-based or electron beam, a lot of them require support structures, which introduce thermal stresses and part distortion during processing. So these challenges have really kept additive in kind of a narrow product field to date. So as Dan mentioned, several years ago, Orchid made a strategic decision that they wanted to change how the additive space looked and come up with something that provided additional benefits to the orthopedic world. So with that, Scott, why don't you tell us a little bit about what Orchid was looking for in an additive manufacturing platform and why you chose the path that you did?
Yeah. Well, Dave, some of the audience may already know this, but Orchid's been in additive for many, many years. Our initial foray into additive was much like many of our competitors and our customers. let's explore what the technology is capable of. Let's buy a machine that looks like this and performs like that. And let's get after trying to solve the problems that our customers put in front of us. In those early days, it was just like those devices that you described. Low-hanging fruit, perhaps, those that had low mechanical requirements, and often was the case, some feature definition that helped with bone ingrowth. What we learned throughout that process was while the technology delivered, some really good devices with clinical benefits, some of the conditions were left unmet. That might have been, fatigue properties that are necessary to really expand into other devices. The costs were typically high, making the application of the technology more of a boutique type of manufacturing modality. And the scale limited our customers' ability, even if they met those other two conditions, the scale or the industrialization of the process limited the adoption. So when we wanted to take another look at it after hearing from our customers how important using 3D could be, we wanted to take a very deliberate approach to assigning what were the key criteria for having a successful ecosystem that delivers 3D printing. And the first thing that we looked at was, well, what are the devices? Less so which instruments, or I'm sorry, which equipment was important, but more so what are the devices of interest, and what do those devices require? And so our customers told us point blank, you need to go out and service the large joint market. It's been underserved, and as part of that, you need to be able to deliver us a few key criteria. So the first one, again, as we mentioned, was fatigue performance. In the past, it's been, fatigue has been a subject of concern around 3D printing. So we wanted to make certain that was resolved right out of the gate. In addition to that, we wanted to make certain that as our customers were exploring new technology or new applications, that we were giving them feature definition. So we didn't want to lose out on the feature definition that was there before. And really what we found was there really wasn't a platform that was capable of delivering all of that in one piece of equipment until we found ultimately what we landed on. But we also wanted to take that deliberate approach, and that deliberate approach was to be able to deliver at scale so that we can get cost transformation, right? Because all of these benefits that we're describing, unless it comes with cost transformation, our customers can't adopt it readily. So for our purposes, that was a big deal. Large joints, again, as we're seeing trends occurring in the marketplace, particularly around the interest of elimination of cobalt chrome, or at least identifying alternative materials, we see that there was an opportunity specifically to serve the space that had predominantly been, let's say, focused on using cobalt chrome as the primary material for those bearing surfaces. So for us, that was the big decision point was, can you deliver on large joints in a scalable way that's cost effective and doesn't represent any kind of risk related to fatigue? And we did so by basing almost all of our diligence on our legacy methods of manufacturing, understanding exactly what we were delivering previously, looking at what the predicates in the market require, and then ultimately meeting or exceeding those in this next generation solution.
That's great. So Melissa, that's a lot of grand plans. Maybe talk to us a little bit about, how this came to fruition within Orchid.
So as Scott mentioned, we took a very deliberate approach. We wanted to focus on device first. We wanted large joint implants that would deliver an ability to deliver cost transformation to our customers. We also wanted that at scale. One of the things about EBM that was really attractive to us was that you could build in the Z direction, which now allowed us to print hundreds of implants at one time versus just one or just a couple. So that is really what helped transform our cost. And we did this with a data-driven approach. So as Dave mentioned, we knew that, EBM was not the most predominant option in the market currently. So we knew we needed to use data to build that confidence amongst our customers that this technology would deliver the same results as traditional manufacturing. So we did extensive data collection and reporting, ranging from material properties, cleanliness, lab structure characterization, and resolution. And we established a team of SMEs in all those areas to help gather this data and ensure that we had what we needed to support our customers and ultimately their FDA submissions.
So you guys focused on an e-beam technology and purchased equipment, but Orchid didn't stop there. You took it a step further, which actually gave you a feature or a technology that I don't think is very well, if utilized elsewhere, I haven't seen much. So you were able to do something that got you to supportless or without using supports to support it. Could you describe a little bit of, what you started with, and then how did you get to this supportless structure system that you have?
So, as with most types of printing, you need some sort of support, whether it's laser and it's attached to the build plate, or with EBM, you need these supports from a heat standpoint. This obviously is not conducive to some sorts of implants. So you can see the femoral, for example, where those supports are placed is not conducive to post-processing and delivering that actual finished device. So we looked for opportunities to remove those supports. And we were able to, by working through our own parameter set, establish the supportless printing, this Orchid 3D method of printing, where we don't have to have those supports. That's opened the door for us in products such as bone plates, any high fatigue sensitive hip stems, femorals, to be able to add those to their product portfolio and what we're able to offer our customers.
So you mentioned something there, but I might highlight this just a little bit, is you mentioned being able to print kind of an orientation free, I think is what you just said inside of there. Can you describe a little bit of, because FDA is always asking questions and your customers are always going to ask questions about, hey, orientation, validation of the process to show that this technology is good. I mean, that's what would be important to me if I'm designing a product. So talk to me a little bit, or tell me a little bit about this less constrained feature, or the not needing to be focused on orientation and the validation of that process. And what does that mean to customers?
Yeah, so as we've optimized our process with the supportless printing, but then also just the EBM technology in general, we have the flexibility to print multiple types of devices in the same build, multiple orientations, multiple locations, and not seeing, any variability to the process. And that's something that we've captured as part of our process validations to ensure that we're getting those consistent results throughout the material properties, dimensionally throughout the build chamber, and still being able to capitalize on that flexibility with this technology.
Yeah. And Dave, to add to that as well, to think about it from the customer perspective, sure, it's great to have orientation free, but what does that mean to me? If I'm an engineer and I'm sitting in my office and I'm trying to design a device, and I hear after I've gotten through all of my initial design, ideas that, hey, we're going to have to put a support on this position, or perhaps we need to hold the device in that orientation in order to maximize fatigue properties, what have you. That's fairly limiting. And when we've talked to our customers and we've shared with them that the ability to print without the support structure or to orient in a specific direction, it really opens up the possibilities of design. And not only does it do that, but as Melissa mentioned, the vast majority of the devices that we print today for large joints require some degree of post-processing. And those supports, whether they be ones that are attached to a build plate or those heat sink supports you see for EBM, they're not easy to remove, right? And it adds complication to our manufacturing process, which increases our cost, right? So oftentimes we see it as both a benefit to the designer, the company that is effectively trying to bring a new feature, a new benefit through a design. But it also has downstream impacts that improve our efficiencies, but also our repeatability of process, right? So the FDA, as you know, is increasing its level of rigor. They're really trying to understand, what can go wrong in a process. And, our philosophy pretty much from the beginning was try to eliminate opportunities for risk that help us to become more efficient and reliable. And if we can do that, then our customers continue to see that as an opportunity to invest in 3D so that they can deliver those new features and benefits to their customers. So again, behind the scenes, initially supportless, we viewed it as an opportunity for ourselves to become better in our post-processing. But as we began to understand what the benefits to our customers could be, and it seems like it's opened quite a few ideas up for our customers to be able to introduce them as part of the features of their devices.
So one of the things I found intriguing, though, about the technology, and was uh, a white paper I wrote with some of the people from Orchid, and we presented on some of the data at the most recent International Society for Technology and Arthroplasty meeting in Rome, was the fact that the fatigue strength. So if we're talking about, you know, designers and someone, you've got someone looking at a new device and opening up doors with, supportless. One of the other things I found very interesting was the ability to get fatigue strengths that were not only, I think, as good, truthfully, were a little better than what we've seen in some of the, whether they be sintered coated, diffusion bonded, any of those. So I really think that was a strong feature designed to that companies can use to open up new possibilities. So with that, I do know that we've got on the screen here, some of those important mechanical properties. I know that if people are interested, they can reach out to Orchid, get a copy of that paper, get additional information going forward. Any feedback you've gotten, Scott, as you've talked to customers with some of the information on this new fatigue strength?
Yeah, absolutely. The response has been tremendous. Our customers for the first time are really seeing material values that, again, sometimes are exceeding those of the predicate devices that have had long successful clinical use. And I think that there's always been a bit of a challenge, and how do you reveal specific information? Sometimes as it pertains to generic properties as opposed to those on specific devices. But our customers came back to us and said, we'd love to see data. Help us with data so that we can have an informed decision, so we can proceed with confidence in this direction. And it didn't come easy. You have to run multiple studies. You have to see how the performance of the equipment is in various positions throughout the build. You have to see how post-processing affects that. And ideally, you don't want to do that while you're still trying to figure it out. You want to do that once you've locked down your processes. And so that took about a year, a tremendous amount of investment and a lot of effort. But what we did was we ultimately delivered to our customers material properties that vastly exceed that of some of their predicate devices that, again, have long, successful clinical history. What does that mean for the future of device design? Well, I think it means that, these alternative materials, perhaps those that previously were chosen, like a cobalt chrome for its material properties, can now be exchanged for other things, those being, printed titanium. I think it also means that perhaps devices can be altered slightly. Do they have to be as thick as they once were? Because they have to now they can support more load with a thinner cross section due to the increased or improved material properties. I think that's an option. We'll have to see how our customers, though, can utilize this. Right? I think until you have data at your disposal to inform your design process, everything's just left to chance. We're presenting actual data so that they can have, at their disposal and make an informed decision around, what's important to them. And I think we'll see that based on what we've presented here or is in this white paper, that the technology that we chose is safe, it's effective for the indications or the use cases we've described, and perhaps some others that we haven't even considered yet. One of the things that we learned along the way, when we first set out, we said we were going to do large joint devices. Well, lo and behold, as we were going through this, and I discovered the material properties, the supportless method of printing, the orientation-free fatigue properties. Wow, we can print bone plates. These trauma plates. And one of the things that we didn't initially consider was the complexity of design for trauma plates has ramped up significantly over the years. And it's really introduced some I'll call it headaches, perhaps cost or difficulties that relate to the production of those devices. Perhaps even just the timing that it takes to bring one of those devices to market with all the various plates that might be put into a system. So for us, recognizing that we now have material properties that meet or exceed the standards, that we can do so again without the supports, really opens the door to application of 3D printing for other product types beyond those that we had initially considered.
Those long contour plates would be a challenge, I think, with for distortion with current systems that require supports to build those. Melissa, maybe could you describe a little bit of the types of products or customers that you've had success with the additive platform so far?
Yeah, absolutely. So customers that we've been working with so far and helping them through kind of make this transition to additive from traditional are really customers that have been looking for a partner in this journey. And we've partnered with them starting in the design phase. So early on in the design phase, so we could help them design their product for additive manufacturing. Because it's just the product, it doesn't stop after printing. There's post-processing we have to do as with any product, and helping them in that design phase, but then all the way through the regulatory phase. This is additive is still newer to the FDA, so ensuring that we have the right data to support their 510(k) submission, answer the FDA's questions about the processes. We've been right there with them, ensuring that they're successful in their approvals.
Scott, we talked previously, and we won't talk about any of your specific customers, but if regard to this kind of questions from regulatory bodies, and there was an interesting customer you had or an experience you had that I think would be great to share with Orchid's ability to deliver on information that regulatory bodies are looking for.
Yeah, that's right. One of the things that is becoming very clear to us is that you need to have a good understanding of not only how to describe the technology, but how do you measure it accurately, the output of your process, and then how do you deliver that data in a way that's easily digested by the agency and other notified bodies, because effectively they're catching up to a lot of the innovation has been brought to the market. They're doing a great job. But we had one customer that came to us. They were in the final stages of their design. They had been making submissions to the agency to get feedback on the work that they had done thus far. And they ran into a roadblock. And the roadblock was, how do you measure this ingrowth structure? And, can you provide adequate data to support that you have consistency throughout your process? And not only that, but, you have consistency in part to part. Well, we've been doing legacy coating styles for years, whether that be plasma spray or centered coatings. This is an area of expertise for Orchid. And so we just take the same kind of legacy knowledge and we apply it to this new standard for, I'll call them ingrowth surfaces. And so the ingrowth surfaces have very specific criteria that you have to meet, and you really can't be cherry picking your data, right? So we really want to make certain that we're looking broadly across the data so that we are adequately and appropriately representing what that structure looks like. And so this customer came to us and asked for help. What we were able to do was we were able to take them off of what they had been working on. We suggested that they adopt our standard lattice, which is available basically to anybody who comes to our business and asks for that solution. And inside of that, we had a full set of data. And that full set of data was, looking at the strut size and the pore size and coefficient of friction and all the things that are important to meet the criteria or the standard. But we also did so in a way that was, again, broadly across that surface, so that our customer as well as the agency knew that that technology was present all the way across where it was critical, and there was no areas that stood the chance of not meeting that condition. We provided all that, bundled it up nicely with our 3D printing for the remainder of the device, included some machining that helped them to have a device that was ready for packaging, and effectively kept them on track for their submission. That happens because we think that there's great opportunity to collaborate with customers, particularly partners, that have a willingness to share and be somewhat transparent in what their objectives are, so that we can deliver them in the full thrust of what Orchid's capable of.
So maybe just getting into some of the details related to that, Melissa, customers that would be coming to you, would they be able, do you have master files with the FDA? Do you have technical reports? What will Orchid be able to provide a customer so that it at least minimizes the pain of getting something cleared for sale?
Yeah. Yeah, so we do have master files, we have technical papers, we are willing to share the data that we've collected with our customer through their process. And as I mentioned before, our processes are validated. So everything from our powder management strategy to printing to depowdering, powder reuse, cleanliness, that's all stuff that we've validated the entire value stream of the process and have been able to share with our customers and the FDA.
So as you've gone through this process, what kind of challenges have you seen with either the technology or implementing the technology? Maybe not the technology itself, but implementing it through other phases of manufacturing.
Yeah. So like any technology, it's not a plug and play. It like I mentioned before, it's taken a whole team of cross-functional team to bring this to a reality. One of the things we had to do is change how we thought about the manufacturing process and how we approached it for these implants. We've been making at Orchid, we've been making implants for 30 years, and we couldn't just take a printed part and drop it into our traditional process. For some of these implants, you're changing the order of operation. You're, instead of forging, machining, then coating a hip cup, you're printing the cup with the lattice structure on it, and then you need to machine it. So how do you protect that lattice surface from damage? How do you clean all the machine fluids from that lattice structure? Those are all things that we had to work through and problem solve so that we could meet the requirements and to successfully deliver a finished device for our customers.
Very good. Scott, one of the things that I think I'm seeing currently in the field to adopt this kind of technology, or if I'm designing something new, what I see as important or adds a lot of value is how quickly can we get from design through to testing to finalized design, any validation. From my perspective, any time that we can shorten in there is just critical to move forward for designing a new device. Traditionally, what I've seen is, if you're going to need to forge something, you're 2 to 4 months getting forging tools and getting forgings in, and then doing all the final processing. What I believe, and maybe I'll ask you to confirm, is I think that's shortened quite a bit with this technology that Orchid's developed. Could you maybe comment a little bit about that timeline of product development and how much you might be able to shorten it by this technology?
Absolutely. If we're talking specifically about large joints, as what's the primary topic of our discussion today, yeah, you nailed it. You've got tooling that's required. You've got various iterations of examining how that tooling performs over time so that we can make sure that we have a reproducible, robust process. Unfortunately, if you've got some feedback from a lab that you just conducted last week and the tools are in process, well, you may not be able to incorporate that feedback, or perhaps you have to delay your project to get those tools readdressed. That is the experience that I'd say most of the designers that may be attending this call today have experienced at one point in their career. What we've learned through our engagement with our customers in the last year plus, is we have a design, we think that we like it. We're not entirely sure until we show it to our key opinion leading surgeons, or perhaps to our executive teams. Can you produce a few of these first so that we can get some concepts confirmed? And I think that's what 3D was used for all along. However, we're not just printing devices. Those are raw materials. Then we have to convert them to something else. So you still have to get through this iterative process quickly. And 3D provides us the opportunity to do that. We've had customers that come to us and they say, we'd like to have something that really is close to our design intent. Here's a little bit of information that should guide your process. Can you get started on that? I take that information, I throw it over to Melissa, and Melissa then takes the time to build various different build models. She does various forms of compensation to individual devices inside of that build. And we print effectively multiple iterations in the same build. And we can do that. Oftentimes customers come to us and they ask for something on a Friday. So long as we have it on Tuesday, it goes into the build. Some days later, perhaps a week later, depending on the size of the build, you get your devices back and we start machining them and we do the other post-processing. We can very quickly iterate on those designs so that our customers have something in their hands that they can demonstrate to their customer or to their executive teams. It's also radically reduced the timeline.
I hadn't thought about that previously, but just rather than doing serial design iterations, being able to, in the very initial build, look at multiple options, design features that might be able to get them all at once, as opposed to a serial build process. So one of the other things, and I find this quite interesting. The supportless printing to me opens up a lot of doors. The trauma plates with the contoured to fit the bone. I don't think that's something that many people have done previously. Because I'll be honest, in what I've seen, most of those, if you print those with supports, you cut the support off, do a little bit of machining on them, and now they've got a big bow in them that you've got to do a lot of rework. Are you seeing a lot of interest? I mean, to me, that offers a lot of value. Are you seeing much interest in that area currently?
Yeah, actually, as we start to introduce these more complicated designs, they typically drive manufacturing expense, right? So that escalation of manufacturing expense has initiated our customers to seek alternative manufacturing methods, right? So again, like you pointed out, one of the biggest issues that you experience when you're machining a trauma plate is residual stress in the material. You take a little bit of material off of this side, it bends that way, and vice versa. And it's just a complicated process. And oftentimes you get to the point where you've invested an awful lot of money into that component only to discover that it's gone bad as a part of the manufacturing process. Melissa pointed this out earlier. We have a hot process as part of our EBM program. So we effectively are stress relieving inside of the machine. Now, we do so in a very special way, in conjunction with a hipping process that we employ. But effectively, it creates a very stable blank, right? Now, Orchid has been a supplier of finished devices as well as raw materials. So some of our customers are coming to us and they're just seeking an alternative to a forged blank or a roughed out milled blank that might be further processed by them. We're a service provider. So what our customers request of us is what we provide. So if they're just looking for a raw material that's more easily machined with fewer complications and closer to net shape than typically what can be produced through a forging or perhaps through a rough machining operation, then our 3D printing process is great. Now, the other thing that our customers have come to us with is these new sizes, right? So you're starting to see, especially for long bone plates, tremendous sizes that typically, may have required some sort of weldment, or maybe there was a extensive machining operation that was required to deliver these long plates, and that's not an easy thing to do. Our printing process actually yields us an opportunity to print nearly to 400 millimeters in total height. So when we think about what you might be required to deliver to support, broad ranges of anatomy or patient size, our system is effectively capable of delivering up to the limits of what you might need clinically. So even if it's on the larger sizes, our process is capable of delivering that with consistency throughout the chamber. And again, it just reduces a lot of the manufacturing complexity that further constrains designs and increases cost and limits the ability for those companies to actually introduce those devices because they're no longer cost effective inside of their business model. So for us, again, this happened to be a nice finding as a result of a lot of other work that we did. But it's really opened the eyes of a number of OEMs who have seen, okay, this is how I could introduce my more anatomical plates to market faster, because we're not doing a lot of the tooling that we described earlier. We're iterating quicker so we could see just how it fits and whether or not the key opinion leading surgeons actually like the result of the design. And we can move it into a production setting with fewer complications, right? So that we're not going to see that strange and unpredictable movement that's typical of either a forging process or the conventional machining process. So really, a very nice accidental finding, if you will, when we started to do our development, but it's resulted in something that I think is going to be a significant change for the way that we think about printing or machining trauma plates in the future.
To switch gears just a little bit, knees in particular. What I've seen over the past several years is there's a lot of push currently to move away from cobalt, a big push to using titanium femurs, but on the same side, titanium femurs need some sort of coating, hardening process in order to do that. The other big trend in the knee world right now is kinematic alignment, medially congruent, medial stabilized knees. And I look at, what's the potential? To me, I see an incredible potential of using an additive technology to print, with a fatigue, a stronger fatigue property, and being able to use something like altitude with that and design this. The synergy, I think, between those two are going to open up some doors for new designs for people to move forward with, or new options moving forward. Your thoughts from either you or Melissa on, what do you see as the synergies with the additive and your altitude technology on being able to address some of those new thoughts that people are moving towards?
Sure. Melissa, you want to take this one?
Yeah, so that as we've gone into the additive journey, we've been able to partner some of our, as you mentioned, our existing technology with our printing. So as the market moves towards titanium focused devices, as you mentioned, knees, we've even seen shoulders and hips. You need that ceramic or that hard coating to help with that articulating surface. So what we've found is our altitude coating is extremely complementary to our printing process, and we're working on several projects right now where we're able to partner those new technologies to deliver a device that meets the needs of the market.
Mm-hmm. And just to add to that, these are two independent technologies. We could use them as a printer, and perhaps a customer comes to us and they have a favored method of surface hardening, or perhaps it's a PVD coating. That's great. We'd love to help you out. We happen to think that we are solving some other problems with altitude. One of the things that we've discovered along the way is our customers are seeking devices that are going to be resilient and work effectively in high demand younger patients, right? So these are things that we have to ensure a level of safety. So, high scratch resistance was of critical importance to us. We wanted some additional thickness to eliminate the potential for burnishing or wear through that we see in some of the explants that have occurred, using some of the thinner film materials. And I think the other thing that we wanted to do is we wanted to eliminate or mitigate to a large extent some of the failure modes that we've seen with some of those other solutions. So edge delamination, cracking, things like that, occur. Oftentimes not necessarily seen as being a significant issue because a lot of those technologies initially were thin films being used over cobalt chrome. Right, cobalt chrome exists as a pretty good bearing surface to begin with. Maybe you don't see the problems until you have to do a revision surgery or an explant. But if we're making a switch to titanium or other soft materials, which happen to have better biocompatibility and certainly, more have better properties when it comes to osseo integration than cobalt chrome. But as you know, that soft substrate needs to be protected because otherwise you can have runaway failures. Our primary concern when trying to address that was to get a thick coating that resisted that. But we also wanted to make sure that with coatings, you have to, again, mitigate against that risk of delamination. That's why you'll see on our device, you actually have quite a small but important feature, which is the wall. And that wall that you see on our device actually protects the coating from edge chipping. Effectively, we've eliminated the edge by burying our coating underneath that metallic rail. And that metallic rail is the same substrate that you'll see in the device, throughout the device. So that same titanium. And when we complete our process, effectively what we wanted to do here was to have something that was scalable again, right? It make no sense for us to make 10. We need to be able to make 10,000 or 40,000 of these devices. So the process is very scalable. It's automated to a large extent. So we feel as though, our regulatory, the bodies that are interested in making sure that we have resilience and reproducibility in our process, all of that lends itself our technology lends itself to those automated or more reliable processes. And we love the results. Scratch resistance is quite strong. Wear resistance is also very good. And thus far, the feedback that we received from customers, whether those be folks that we had the opportunity to show recently at ISTA and beyond, has been tremendous. This is a solution that it seems a number of OEMs are seeking, but also clinicians. And when they see that we're trying to solve specific problems with this type of technology, they can appreciate what we've done.
And I want to highlight one, particular feature that I think we talked about with the additive is the ability to create specific design features that might be much more difficult to do. The idea of that wall or the rail that makes it so that you don't have that thin edge to prevent delamination, I think was much easily achieved with the additive technology than to go back and either machine or forge it or anything like that. So
Right.
as we move, we're getting close to, we need to leave a little time for some question and answers. What I'll do is Scott, I'm working with a company and an OEM or a design firm, and we're working on a new product. And we're thinking about using additive, and we're going to call Orchid and say, "Hey, look, we want to work with you." How would you summarize, or what are the key considerations that I should keep in mind if I'm in that position?
Yeah. So I think any design today has to not only be a great device, but it has to fit your business model, right? So at the end of the day, if it doesn't meet the criteria to effectively improve the outcomes of the business, those are projects that oftentimes don't get off the ground. So start with Orchid, talk to us about what you need to hit, whether it happens to be a specific feature or whether it has to be a specific cost. We can find a way to get you there. Oftentimes we do that through DFM, right? So design for manufacturing, let's get involved at the beginning. The other thing that we want to make certain that we do is we understand what is your I'll call it your level of understanding around 3D, and then how comfortable do you feel in actually conducting your regulatory submission? That'll also help us to understand what kind of support you're looking from us and what kind of data is it that you require in order to complete your submission. So those are some, I'll call them right up front, critical conversations that we should be having. Beyond that, the takeaway that I think that most of our customers should hear is, you're not alone. I think a lot of people have gone to the 3D market in the past and they've had expectations that the cost was going to be exorbitant, or perhaps the lead time around producing the number of devices that were required was going to be too long for their business. We thought about a lot of that as we started to do, as we did our diligence and sought to identify the right ecosystem for our 3D program. And our desire at the end of the day was to make EBM, or more specifically 3D, more accessible, not only more accessible to the large companies, but to the mid-sized companies and those smaller, more boutique OEMs that need the support of a company like Orchid. And then to be able to deliver that at scale, at cost, on and on and on, without constraints for capacity, and again, limitations around processing. So for us, we would love to speak with a number of our customers, many of those who are in attendance today. If we missed you in Rome, we're going to be in Dallas for AUKUS. Myself and a couple of my colleagues will be there. There's an opportunity here to reach out as well. If you'd like to see some of the data yourself, I'm happy to share that. I think make an informed decision, understand what you're capable of, what this new system is capable of delivering. And if you can leverage it, we're ready to serve.
Great. With that, first of all, thank you, Scott and Melissa, for inviting me to join the conversation here today. And we'll turn it over to Dan and look for questions that we can discuss.
Great. Thanks, Dave. Yeah, it was wonderful, wonderful discussion. So thank you all. Just want to start off by asking the group, how, Dave, you kind of alluded this to earlier, but how broadly is supportless printing being used across the industry? Can you comment on that or maybe expound on that point?
We've heard of people exploring it, perhaps in limited applications. I think it may be EBM specific. I couldn't tell you with a great deal of clarity as to whether or not laser's capable of delivering that technology. However, we've shared this with a number of customers, and the feedback that we've received from them is it may be a very, very small group, if not an exclusive condition, with the features that we're providing in terms of material properties and the like. So I think it's maybe less than a handful in the market today. The good news is it's EBM, it's known, right? So we're not talking about introducing something that is a brand new concept to the FDA or to the notified bodies. It is still melting titanium in a very consistent way. As Melissa mentioned, our process is not just how we do the melting, but it's also all the things that happen after that to deliver that data or those features. But yeah, I think it's very, very small. That's what we've discovered along the way.
Great, thanks. Yeah, we have some questions rolling in. So what is the material density of the implants you validated with your supportless approach? And can you comment on, for the implant layers and all the implant layers in the build chamber?
Yeah, so material density or build density, if we clarify that. Material density. Well, we build with a layer thickness of about 50 microns. With the supportless printing, we're at about 70 microns for our traditional method. And kind of with a build density around 15% as well, like to maintain.
Yeah, and typically our process when we go with this new method that we described to you, it utilizes a hipping operation. So typically you use HIP to close internal pores. And when we get to that point, we're like 99.9% dense. The beauty of our process is, again, very controlled. When we're doing this melting operation, one of the unique things about it is that we control the beam strength and the dwell time of each individual pixel that we melt. So what that means is that we're not creating keyholes inside of each one of those layers that oftentimes leads to, porosity that is evident, in systems that don't have a vacuum or something along those lines. We do that whole process, and then when we're done, we go one step further and we hip everything, and so that hipping operation will close up any of those pores that are not exposed to the exterior of the device. And what we've discovered is the number of those pores that remain, especially those that would be on a bearing surface, we machine them away. So that's the benefit of those, that I'll call it a combined operation between both the printing as well as the hipping, and then understanding that the end use of these devices often requires some degree of machining on some of those surfaces, and oftentimes those remaining pores that are on the exterior are eliminated.
So let me chime in just a little bit there, Scott, there, but I wouldn't anticipate that all devices would require hipping.
That's right.
Sensitive devices would require hipping, but there may be a lot of devices, and I'm thinking of acetabular shells in particular, some other things like that, that you don't need that extra, so you wouldn't need to add that extra cost into there.
Absolutely. Yeah. With today's designs of tibia inserts for knees, I'm sorry, not inserts, but tibia plates for knees, more often than not, with those large keels that are prominent today, hipping's not required. The process that we employ as a standard for us is more than adequate. And the same thing goes for cups. We do, for some instances, we use the hipping process because it helps us with polishing. So we'll mix and match depending on really what the end result is required.
Yep, agreed.
Great, thanks. Dave, I'm going to throw this one at you. Can you address reimbursement issues? There's concerns that some payers won't reimburse for 3D printed devices. Have you or your clients experienced any of those roadblocks to adoption?
I'll be honest, that's a difficult question for this forum. Neither myself and I don't think Orchid are in the reimbursement side. We're working with OEMs. I think it's just something you've got to have a discussion with the regulatory bodies or the payers and say, hey, look, here's what we think this is important, and just have those discussions of what the value added is for the payer.
I think just to follow on to that too, when we set off to do this, we understood that cost was going to be a significant consideration in selecting any kind of method of manufacturing or part of your design process. And we're finding that because of the increased use of 3D, perhaps I'll call it that special pricing consideration is becoming more and more difficult to come by, which was effectively why we knew that when we got into 3D printing specifically, that we had to do something about reducing cost dramatically. So our customers need these devices to remain competitive, to increase their share, but they may not have the luxury of asking for a significant upcharge for those devices. So therefore, when we deliver our solution, it has to be consistent effectively with the cost that we see today, or better than that of the cost that we see today for the legacy methods of manufacturing. From our perspective, one of the things that we get from 3D printing is significantly more stable cost parameters, because we're eliminating operations that typically are bound by high labor cost. So for us, this is our way of being able to bring to the market more cost-effective manufacturing that includes features that our customers are seeking so they can be competitive in the market. So maybe you can't get more for your device today, but you need to keep up with the Joneses. And if you do keep up with the Joneses, you can't pay more. So, that was our philosophy getting into this solution set. And we'll continue to press on those levers every time we can so that we can bring our customers a more cost-effective solution.
Very good point, Scott.
All right, I'm going to throw this one at the group. How do you work with startups that might have surface solutions that need an implant to apply the surface technology for a 510K?
Yeah, so I can take that one, Scott. So we deliver, if you're looking for just the implant, that's something that we provide, and as printed condition as well. We have customers who've done just that, for ephemeral. We've supplied them the implant, and they've applied, a different coating than our altitude coating to it. So we're willing to work with the customers and meet their needs. Even startups, I think there's a couple we work with right now, getting early in with that design phase is what's critical.
And the other one I think about for the startups, Melissa, that Orchid offers is, you mentioned you can do just that very basic, it will give you the 3D printed, but you've got the ability to work on the design side for manufacturability, all the way down to finished processing, cleaning, and supplying them parts and boxes. So I think that's really, for startups, they can have their choice. All companies, but I think particularly for startups that don't have expertise in those areas, Orchid has those experts available.
Great. We've got a few minutes left. I'll try to get a couple more in. A lot of additive manufacturing is focused on implants. Has Orchid had much involvement or seen interest in instruments or surgical tools?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Today's biggest challenge for our customers is not just do we have the implants, but where are the instruments, and can we support additional sites of care? The ASCs are requiring our customers to jockey instruments across town or perhaps across state. So we're hearing from our customers, hey, is there an opportunity for me to convert some of my existing instruments to something that perhaps is lighter, right? So titanium immediately comes to mind. Can that help to significantly reduce logistics cost? I think so. We're already seeing titanium adopted by a couple of, I would say, some forward-leaning OEMs that are in the space right now. And I'd say the easiest and lowest hanging fruit for some of those customers, especially if we're talking about large joint systems, all the trials. You saw our tibias, you saw our femurs, to incorporate similar type of technology that we're using today to print implants, to print those instruments. It's really almost identical. And as far as the surface conditions go, we think that altitude's great for an implant. But we're not opposed to working with any of the great competitors out there that are doing thin film PVD. For that particular application, it might be a perfect technology for use there. So, what we like to consider ourselves at Orchid is a solution provider. If the device requires a printing operation at Orchid and perhaps some specialty operation that exists outside of us, we'll work to coordinate that for you. But more importantly, you're right, instruments. I think instruments stand to benefit greatly from 3D printing. It's just a matter of understanding what your needs are. Right? We don't want to throw this solution at everything broadly. We want to direct it deliberately.
Great. Last one. We have just a couple minutes left. So are you seeing phasing out of sintered bead TPS coatings as demand for 3D printed implants goes up?
I think that's a good question. I think as our customers continue to seek innovation, right, whether that be various different methods of fixation, whether these are devices that include posts, perhaps there's ribs on them. Sintering is certainly a very capable and has a long life and strong clinical history, but it becomes more and more complicated to put sintering onto these new designs because there's new features that are being introduced that create, again, cost complexity. Because what we've done at Orchid is we've used our ASA matrix, which is used throughout the industry today, as you described, as a sintered coating. We took that coating that we've been using and we effectively digitized it. So we've taken what was very well respected, used broadly in the market. We've enhanced it slightly in certain areas. Here we can control coefficient of friction. We can modify the struts a bit. We can expand and reduce the pore size. But generally speaking, we think that, it's moving in that direction, and not because the sintered process is delivering bad results, but because when we go through this 3D printing operation and we can eliminate those steps, we can deliver our customers not only a great product, but do so at oftentimes a reduced cost relative to the predicates. So I think it still exists and it does the things that it's supposed to do on all those legacy products. But as our customers start to look at what's next, more often than not, we find that they land with 3D.
Great. We'll leave it there. Thank you, Dave, Melissa, and Scott, for the great presentation discussion. We appreciate you sharing your perspective and expertise. If you do have any additional questions or want some more information, just please reach out to the Orchid team. They'll be more than happy to respond. With that, thanks and have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. See ya.